Postponed in July due to the pandemic, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's 2020 summit was held on November 10th in Moscow. Efforts to combat the virus were an important topic of discussion at this year's virtual reunion. But what else was on the agenda? How did the SCO navigate tensions between India and China? And with the UN Secretary General calling for deeper cooperation, what could a stronger UN-SCO partnership lead to? Joining me to answer these questions, Vijay Prashad, Senior Fellow at China's Renmin University. He joins me on the phone and via Skype by Han Hua, a member of the China Forum Executive Committee. Welcome to you both. Ms. Han, I want to begin with you. After being postponed due to the pandemic in July, the summit was held in virtual form in Moscow on November 10th, and combating the coronavirus was one of the major discussion points. But besides the pandemic, what other issues were addressed this year?
Thanks for having me. I think first and foremost, the SCO Summit gives everybody the opportunity to reiterate the Shanghai spirit, which is mutual trust, mutual respect, joint consultation, and openness. Shanghai has always been the iconic city of openness and the practical cooperation in China's history, in China's opening up process, so that people in different member states can learn, can practice, can share in an ever-changing world in the context of the global pandemic crisis to face the unconventional security threats better and to be stronger together. This is the very important meaning of this SCO Summit, and also to enhance each party's economic development and share the best practices among member states, including but not limited to digital economy, to health and culture and education exchange, and to the Belt and Road initiatives in the areas of infrastructure construction and operation, and even to e-commerce and some new technology innovation, like President Xi Jinping proposed. Next year, there will be a hopefully offline digital economy summit or some kind of conferences among member states in Chongqing.
Mr. Prashad, what agenda items caught your eye at the summit this year? Because apparently the SCO has released a document detailing member states' responses to COVID-19. So coronavirus fighting and prevention efforts obviously way high on the agenda. What is your observation?
It's really nice to be with you. It's very important that we're talking about the Shanghai Cooperation meeting. India and China are two major countries in Asia. In the middle of this pandemic, both countries bring immense skill and ability to deal with the pandemic in their different ways. China, of course, broke the chain of the infection. India has an immense capacity to produce vaccines. If the tension between India and China could be lessened, these two important Asian countries would be able to collaborate, work towards producing at scale the vaccine, and really help the world. But unfortunately, between India and China, there are several outstanding issues on the one hand, including, of course, the question of the border, which has not been fully agreed by both sides. I think this is a very important issue that needs to be dealt with so that Asia can move forward. And secondly, I feel that the two countries need to come together outside pressure from the United States, which has drawn India into the Quad. It's the most unhealthy development for the future of Asia.
I want to also bring in Ian Goodrum, senior editor and columnist at China Daily. Mr. Goodrum, welcome to the program, where we're talking about what was the highlight of this year's SCO Summit in Moscow, held virtually, of course. I want to zoom in on the issue of the pandemic because even though we're edging closer to a post-pandemic era, it's still a very real threat. And Chinese President Xi Jinping is calling on SCO member states to set up a hotline linking their Centers for Disease Control to strengthen cooperation in epidemic surveillance, research, prevention, and treatment. In your observation, what do members of the SCO need the most at this point, and how can the SCO facilitate their needs at this phase of the pandemic?
Well, it's an interesting question because different countries have different needs. I think you have different situations in different places, so that information sharing is going to help quite a lot. You can keep each other apprised of your situations and then kind of tailor-make the response and then coordinate assistance, coordinate expertise, coordinate resources and materials, and of course push hard on the ongoing research into the vaccine, of which there are many candidates in the pipeline. But this is very important and useful mechanism to achieve those results from cooperation, and the SCO is a way to make sure that any pandemic response, no matter what the level of response is, because as it might be easy to forget for those of us that are in China that the rest of the world is still having a great deal of difficulty dealing with the pandemic. Being able to tailor-make, as I said, the approach and the response, and that's the best possible way to do that is to set up direct lines of communication between these countries.
Mr. Prashad, I want to come back to you. In his summit speech, Prime Minister Modi called for member states to respect each other's territorial integrity. It was the first interaction between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi since the border clashes between Indian and Chinese troops earlier this year. You talked about the great potential that China and India could enjoy if they choose to work together, but this has been a very difficult year for the two countries, for the two neighbors. What is your reading on where the situation stands right now, and did leaders get a chance to address and manage the differences between the two at the summit this year?
Well, I was very pleased that the summit was held and wasn't postponed further, because I think it's important for the leaders to at least look at each other, to acknowledge that there's an issue here, and begin a process of rebuilding trust, at least between the governments. You see, I don't think at the SCO itself there will be a further advance beyond this, beyond the acknowledgement of the problem, the need to solve the issue. There are two other platforms that I think are going to be very important in the year ahead. Number one, I think because India is going to join the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member, I think that will be a place where India and China could work together on issues of common agreement, build trust, build unity, and this must lead towards a bilateral summit. You know, it's about time the issues that divide India and China along the border need to be delimited. I mean, it's a real quandary why for such a long time there's been no clarity about this. And I think, you know, the rise of right-wing feeling in India has to be tamped down. Mr. Modi has to be put under pressure to come as an honest broker to a bilateral discussion. Once this is set aside, there is immense potential, not just for India, not just for China, but for Asia, and, you know, it don't sound too dramatic, for the world.
Ms. Han, you at the top of the show mentioned many things that the SCO platform could provide to members, and it's very interesting you mentioned the Shanghai spirit. Could the Shanghai spirit guide members like China and India into a better, more friendly direction going forward? Do you think the SCO is a useful platform for de-escalating tensions and, in a way, repairing India-China relations?
Yes, totally. I think this is a very good point, and the Shanghai SCO can be a bridge or a great platform for China and India to find more cooperation areas than the tensions now. So in my opinion, the tensions should remain within the two borders of the two countries, so that these two countries have already established some mechanisms, including the military, different levels of military negotiations, different diplomats talks and discussions about the border issues, about some other disputes. But SCO, as well as some other multilateral framework, can remain as a platform or a bridge to seek and pursue more cooperation for both countries. And when the cooperation grows, so that the tensions can be reduced, in my opinion. For example, India and China, like my Indian colleague just mentioned, about vaccine manufacturing, about economic development to ensure the security and the development among the two countries. And also the two countries have already started the discussions regarding the maritime cooperation in Indian Ocean, in South China Sea. Can we further these kind of constructive talks so that the two countries can find more practices in this cooperation so that the tensions can be reduced?
Mr. Goodrum, as you well know, the SCO is far more than just a security alliance from the time when it was founded. It has now expanded to an organization that facilitates member states in economic ties and trade relations, and members have stood to benefit from closer ties. But it's not entirely unexpected that two countries under the framework could conflict in the way that China and India have this year. Do you think that bilateral tensions, like border disputes, could possibly be resolved or settled with the mechanism afforded by the SCO umbrella?
Certainly, and I think the progress on that in this particular question has already begun, because on the sidelines of an SCO meeting in September, the foreign ministers of China and India came out with a 5-point agreed joint statement that was all about dialogue and discussion in the resolution of this particular dispute. So we're already seeing the track being laid down for some of the more positive developments in relations between China and India, but then also between all the member states. So I think there's already been a great deal of progress made, and we hope to continue to see that, because I think what distinguishes the SCO from perhaps other international bodies, and this is not to cast water on any particular one, but it's a regional grouping for dialogue that allows discussion and cooperation and dialogue among the countries in the region, among themselves, to hash out and come to these agreements without outside interference. I think that was a key point in the speech that was given by Xi on Tuesday. So this creation of a mechanism, as you say, to work out these differences, if they may exist, is very important, and it's very essential to the continuation of good relations between countries that do share borders, that do share many, many interests due to geography and due to economic interests and trade interests. So I hope to see more of this sort of progress continue as these meetings take place, and we're glad that the meeting was able to take place virtually, because it continues that discussion and that dialogue.
And I think it's fair to say we all share in your hope. I'm afraid that's all the time we have on this topic. My thanks go to Ian Goodrum, Vijay Prashad, and Han Hua. Thank you so much for your analysis.